This video has been put together for our Church Planting Catalysts training in 2017. The reason for this video is to help you as the trainer to prepare for your time presenting to your fellow CPCs. The title of this session is PlantPro Update and Philosophy of Use. And we want to emphasize the philosophy of use. The Church Planting Catalysts have been through many trainings on the planting projector, and I think most of them have it down on how to use it in terms of going through the process and getting it done. However, where I think the big deficiency is, it's in the philosophy of its use. This fall training for CPCs is going to have a constant theme of building relationships with your church planters. That's a key aspect of the planting projector that you as the trainer needs to emphasize. That this is not something that the CPC sends a link to or sends instructions to the church planter to get it done, and then because he's the reviewer, reviews it later. This is intended to be a vehicle to build relationship with the church planter, that they would work through it together. If that cannot be done shoulder to shoulder, then it really needs to be done in a video context or something more intimate where they're walking through each step of the PlantPro to build relationship and to coach and mentor during that time. There's certain things that we want the CPC to convey to the church planter in terms of thinking about the future, in terms of thinking about the required partners that he's going to need to bring to the table. There are so many conversations that can happen as the CPC leads the church planter through this program that we don't want to miss that important aspect. In fact, it's one of the main drivers for creating this program for our church planters so that they would tie in closely to their church planting catalyst. So let me start this presentation and try to model it for you. Remember, as I've said to all the other trainers, this is your presentation. I'm going to be leading you through this keynote right now in kind of a bland fashion, just the facts, right? Because these are the key points that you need to convey to your session. However, I fully expect that you would add your personality, your personal experience, your own anecdotes or whatever to bring it to life in your context. However, if you want to add to the keynote or to the PowerPoint, which you can do, it's an open presentation. If you're adding to content, I need to see that content and approve it before you put it into the presentation. So email me with your changes. If you see changes that will meet your context better, feel free to, let's have a conversation about that. Send me an email, rcurtis@nam.net, and we can talk about what those changes look like before you put them in the presentation. Other than that, this is pretty boilerplate, so I would encourage you to use the presentation as it is, but I am not closed to having some additions that are specific or unique to your context. Okay, this presentation is made up of two parts, basically the didactic or the learning part and then the activities part at the end. And so you'll want to rehearse it a couple times and get through it because there are timed aspects to it later on, and you'll want to finish the first part and give time enough to walk through the exercise. You can review the time breakdown on the presenter notes that I have also provided to you. So here we go. The presentation should go something like this. Hi, my name is Rick Curtis, and I am the National CPC Director for the North American Mission Board, and I also have the privilege of serving as NAM's West Region Mobilizer. Glad you're here today. We're going to talk about the planting projector, and we're going to talk about two things. First, a quick update to the additions that have been made with 3.1, and secondly, and most importantly, its philosophy and use. You see, we've been using the plant projector now for a few years, and most of you know how to track through that program and get it done. However, where I think we are all deficient is that we're failing to adhere to the philosophy of use of the projector, and that is to build better relationships with your church planters and having the ability or using the projection to foster a coaching mentor relationship. You see, there are certain questions that are asked A new church planter doesn't have the wisdom that you do necessarily. Having walked down the road with several church planters, you know what budgetary needs will be needed for that area. You know the number of partners they're going to need. You know what to anticipate in terms of giving. You know all those things that they have no idea about. And as you coach them through each of those items face to face, you can build better relationship with them. If you haven't noticed it yet, a recurring theme in this fall's training is that you, as a church planting catalyst, are building relationship with the church planter and encouraging them to get involved in brotherhood so that they are tied together relationally for the longevity and health of church planting in your geography. So let's look at the update briefly. There are 3 things that I want to touch on here as I give you an update to the 3.1 church plant projector. First of all, multi-year tracking is now available. So from this point forward, actually we started already, but from this point forward, you'll be doing renewals in year 2, and then year 3, and then year 4, etc. Because now we have the ability to capture that information and store that information so we can literally see the progress. As you know, before, every time we did a renewal, we were simply doing year 1 again, and we were not capturing that data. It's because the functionality of the software was not allowing the capture from the year 2 window, and things got a little messed up there for a while. And so we called that back, and now we're ready to move forward. Year 2 now, or the latest year, propagates the remittance or the funding end of the program. So multi-year tracking, we're using multi-year tracking now. So what that means is that when you go to renew, you are filling in year 2 data, but at the same time, you are also plugging in year 1 final numbers. So that way we can see over a 5-year course the progress of that church plant and make decisions or adjust strategy based on the data that we've captured. So that's multi-year tracking. You need to start using that if you haven't done so already. The reason why that is important is point number 2. That multi-year data informs our quarterly reporting. Those 2, the quarterly reporting, we'll have a session later on in this training about the quarterly reporting and how that all works. But for now, those 2 are going to work together. Quarterly reporting and PlantPro will share data, allowing partners and sending church and convention partners to be informed of that data in a more real-time way. And then the third thing I want you to really take to heart is that the Plant Projector is a financial guide in a lot of ways. It's not just a way to report your finances to partners or to assure that you're going to send the right numbers to the convention for your funding. It serves in those functions, yes, but this is a guide for the church planter and you to work through the financial allocations that you anticipate seeing in the future, which leads us really to our next point. Now, I want to drop a note to you trainers here outside of the presentation and just say you will need to be very, very familiar with the multi-year aspect of 3.1 before you do this presentation. You've been chosen because your regional mobilizer has high confidence in you. But if it's been a while since you placed a church planter through this in a highly relational way, you will need to create some projections, get familiar with the tool at that intimate level to refamiliarize yourself with how this works. Because you are going to get questions from the audience because it's going to be assumed that you're ahead of the rest of your crowd on this. So do what you can to polish this, work with your regional mobilizer. Let's get this top notch for your presentation. Now let's move on to the next slide. So as we shift now and talk about the philosophy of use for the planting projector, I want you to understand certain things very, very clearly. Number 1, the planting projector is a tool. It is not a hoop. We need to continually emphasize to each of you as church planting catalysts, this is not a hoop. So many of our software programs that we've put together, the Wrap or Planting Projector or all these things, people see them as hoops to get their funding. That whole narrative is shifting. You're going to see how in the Building Brotherhood presentation later on in this training that the whole philosophy of what we do has slowly shifted over the years, and we're about relationship and brotherhood. That's the only staying power we're going to have with our church planters. So if we present these things as hoops they need to complete in order to get their funding, we're defeating our greater purpose and our greater value. The PlantPro is a tool that can help and assist that church planter to do a better job of planting his church and forecast for his future needs. So you need to emphasize this is not a hoop. The next thing I want to look at is the relational aspects of PlantPro. It is designed for the CPC and the church planter to work together. Many of you, church planting catalysts, have in the past sent a email to your church planters saying, hey, I need you to fill out this planting projector, put me as the reviewer, I'll review it when I get it, and I'll send it on to the regional mobilizer for his approval, and we'll get you some funding. We need to stop that narrative now. This software was designed so that you and the church planter can develop a relationship and set baseline or start the relationship in a coaching/mentor type relationship. The PlantPro is to be done face to face. And in current situations where there's huge geography or you can't match your schedules together in the time frame that you need to fill out the planning projector, do everything you can to do it face to face by video or some other method. Because the point of this is that you coach them through each and every screen. You have the conversations that need to be had at each screen. You look, for example, at the screen that says how much giving is there per person per week in your area. That's a teachable moment where the church planting catalyst can show his value and knowledge to the church planter. Build that respect, build that relationship, have that dialogue about how this amount is what's typical for their area and how you can encourage them to put in place certain behaviors that lead to talking about finances as you plant your church, challenging your people to give to the cause of your church plant, those type of things. This is all by design to be a coaching venue and a relational venue, not simply a hoop like we spoke of before. And then also, it's designed for setting and monitoring benchmarks, especially now that 3.1 has the multi-year functionality. We are looking at where do we want to be next year, and did we make it? When next year comes, we have a place to put the actuals in. Did we make what we projected? How do we have to readjust our strategy? What are the things we need to think through for year 3 as we prepare for the finances and the attendance and all the other things related to year 3? What are those key things that we need to do to meet those benchmarks? And how do we check back with each other, CPC and CP? How do we check with each other during the course of the year to make sure that we're on track for reaching those benchmarks? And now finally, we're going to talk about workflow. Here's where there's a shift, because one thing we do realize is that the pre-projection worksheet, which is at plantingprojector.com, is not being utilized like it should. In fact, it's hardly ever used. So think about the workflow here for a minute. You, as a church planting catalyst, should have the church planter complete that pre-projection worksheet, not the actual projection, first off. So that way they're thinking through, they're generating their own questions to ask you. So that way when the two of you get together to actually do the projection together, building relationship, entering into that coaching mentor situation, that they have questions prepared and you have guidance and direction that you can give. That's at the core of our philosophy of use with the PlantPro. Have them do the pre-projection worksheet, not the actual projection first. Then work through the projection together in person. We've emphasized that already, but we need to re-emphasize it again. In person, in person, in person. Now, a note to the trainers. You might read this note to the CPCs that are in the room. The note on the PowerPoint or keynote says, the activity that follows will illustrate why this is important. We need to reiterate and re-emphasize the need for this projection to be done in person, whether by shoulder to shoulder or by video. Preferred always in person. Now there's one last thing that we need to address before moving on to the activity section of the presentation. That is, when is the best timing for engagement? When is the best time for the CPC to sit down with the church planter and begin to do the PlantPro? Well, naturally, it's going to fit into the discovery process, so it has to be done after pre-assessment and before the assessment retreat. That being said, if the pre-assessment determines that the planter needs to go back into the pipeline, then you would postpone the PlantPro until he's ready. Conversely, if it shows that he's ready to plant and he's ready to give an invitation to the assessment retreat, you need, as the CPC, to engage him immediately and do that planting projector prior to his attendance at the retreat. Now let's move to the activities section. Okay, so now we're going to shift to exercise. It's a fast-paced exercise. So here's the instructions. Review each page of the projection that follows. Discuss at your table the data that is presented. If there are problems or concerns, make note of them and design the discussion you would have with the church planter. Again, actions: view and discuss. Note issues or concerns with the projection and discuss the necessary church planter conversation using a different person for each conversation. We're going to lead them through a timed projection. Each page of the projection has a timer on it. We got to hold to that because we need them to act fast. But then you're going to go into an immediate Q&A time and say, hey, what did you see? What concerns did you have? And you're going to lead them through the next slide that shows the problems that we've indicated. Now, they might come up with other problems. That's great. The wisdom of the crowd is always better than the wisdom of one. So they may find problems that you didn't even see in the projection. And if so, unpack that. Take the time to unpack that in the room, but highlight the ones that you see that are presented in the presentation. So let's go through the activity. Activity 1. So the first screen that you're going to see is just detailing the name of the projection. You'll note that there is no timer on this page because all you're doing is introducing the projection. You should say something like, as you can see, this is a familiar page. This is the first page of the projection where the church planter puts in the name of the projection, the church name, the church plant city, the state, the reviewer, who the reviewer is. That's where you as the CPC need to be, and the convention name. One bit of advice you may want to give the church planning catalyst at this point is to say to them, be specific on the name of the projection. Too often we get projection 1, projection 2, projection 3, projection 4, and it's kind of nice when you have the church name there and then projection 1. We get a lot of generically named projections. Although the reviewer should know what that is, it's a lot easier if you're working with multiple church planters that when that shows up in your portal, it has the church name as well as the projection number. So you might think about the naming convention and how you're asking your church planters to name their projection. Screen 2, we start on the actual timed projector screens. So you'll notice that this is the budget builder anticipated attendance and income screen. And I give 4 minutes on this screen for the CPCs in the room to huddle together and to discuss this plan. I'm not sure I said it before, but this is a note to the trainer. You want to huddle these guys around 3 to 5 in a group. If you're a table of 8, that's fine. 8's a little more than I typically like, but if you're at long tables or square tables, or go ahead and have them break into groups of 3 or 5 to do this exercise together. Okay, so after the 4 minutes of looking at this screen, you're going to ask them what they saw. A lot of them are going to see the same things that we're going to highlight, but that's okay because they may mention it from the floor, say, hey, why is there only 18 in attendance after the first year? That's a big concern for me. And somebody on the floor might miss that comment. So you're going to go back and emphasize that. So that's okay. Don't worry about duplication there. You could actually point it out and say, hey, as Mike picked up this exact one, that there were 18 in the first year. So then after the group chimes in with some of their concerns, don't give them too long, just give them a few minutes. Then go through the concerns that we've highlighted on each page. For example, the first one, should this have been initiated with only 5 people? You got to ask the question, why did we do a projection and get that far down the road with a guy that only had 5 people? Not to say that that's wrong, but it's worthy of questioning why we're taking a lot of time or putting a lot of effort into a guy that's only got 5 people. Next, he forecasted 100, but he landed at 18 after the first year. That is definitely worthy of discussion. As you coach and mentor through this, what questions do you need to ask about a guy that forecasted 100 and landed at 18? What benchmarks can you set for the next time? What discussions do you need to have about outreach? It's a host of questions here, but these are things that you should be able to see in the projection ahead of time and say, whoa, wait, what's going on here? Next, given year 1, is 300 in attendance after year 5 realistic? Is this a moment where you have to coach your church planner to readjust what they think they're capable of doing? As we move to the offering section, we have multiple issues here. But number 1, right off the bat, the forecasting of $50 per person per week is massively unrealistic. You, as the church planning catalyst, know that what that number might be. In the South, you might get 20 to 40, but for example, in my region in West, it's somewhere between 6 and 8, maybe up to $11 per person per week is realistic. You need to know that number as a CPC, because if this church planner is basing his financials off of an anticipated 50 per person per week, then he's going to have a wake-up call for sure. And the entire projection at this point is invalid. So in the actuals, you'll notice that they actually came in at $7 per person per week in the first year. So you really need to have the question, why are you forecasting $30 per person per week in the next year? If you have core data that says 7, why are you projecting 30? Now, we want to have that mentor/coach conversation at this point and say, hey, you do need to talk to your people about giving, and you need to be unashamed to ask for that and to build your people up in that skill set. But to jump from 7 to 30 is seriously unrealistic. Even the rest of these numbers are unrealistic based on the actuals. So you need to have that conversation with them. How about other thoughts? So on the next screen then, we talk about our sending church, right? So we're going to look at the sending church, and we're going to look for problems on this screen. They're given 2 minutes because the problem should be obvious. As you know, a sending church is required to be a Southern Baptist church. You cannot have a Methodist church as your sending church. Now, maybe they can be a supporting church, but they surely cannot be the sending church. Will we take the Methodists' money, $18,000 a year? Absolutely. But we can't allow them to be a sending church. So we'll want to move those over into supporting church area. Next screen, supporting churches. Notice that High Hopes Baptist Church is giving $48,533 a year to this plant. If you compare that to the previous screen of $18,000, and you're looking at this projection and you don't automatically arrive at the conclusion that you need to swap those two out, make High Hopes Baptist Church the sending church and put the Methodist Church in as the supporting church, you've missed something big. This projection should never go forward with a Methodist church as the sending church. That's just an error. Other thoughts? So then the next screen is the funding NAM through convention. There's only 2 minutes on this screen because there's no error there. But it is an opportunity to speak to the planter about the yearly giving. In this case, you'll see an $18,000 down to $12,000 second year, down to $6,000 third year. this is a good opportunity to discuss that none of those are guaranteed. They're based on review and reinitiation of the plant projector, that's just there for forecasting reasons, and the only one that the projection is going to solidify is year one, the $18,000. Next is associational giving. Obviously, as a CPC, this is your opportunity to talk about the local association. As NAM employees, we would always encourage that, but obviously we can't mandate that. Next, we have the individual screen. Each of these are 2-minute screens because they won't require a lot of conversation. You'll notice that there's an individual here that is giving $1 as a partner. Why on earth would there be a $1 partner? Let's talk about that. Many of our CPCs put $1 partners in because the church planter wants somebody else notified of their financial giving. For example, some of our Sin City missionaries do this because they want to know what the package would be. So you would put the Sin City missionary in here as a $1 partner so that they can receive the financial breakdown when the email goes out, because partners are notified, and that's why you would do this. So anybody that the church planter might want notified of their financial giving package, you can put them here in as a $1 partner. The question really is, do you want confirmation required from these individuals? Because if you get a $1 partner, somebody you're just trying to inform of the financial package, but they're not really decision makers, to require confirmation might hold up the projection. So you may take confirmation required out of that. The next screen, 2-minute screen, is other. There's not much to discuss here. At this point, the CPC might ask the question why there's no other support. Most church planners have other people giving them support. This is also, the other screen is also a good place to compile multiple small givers into one amount. Remember, the purpose, it's not a hoop, it's a tool. So if they have 22 different individual givers that are giving $10 to $100 a month, you can aggregate those together and put $1,500 a month or $18,000 a year in year one, etc., because it helps build the financial snapshot. And you don't want to list each individual partner here, especially grandma if she gives $1.25 a month. You can aggregate those and put one figure in here. You need to encourage them to do so as well, because that helps build that true to life picture of their finances. Okay, we've got a 4-minute screen, budget builder, anticipated expenses. Here's where we've been bitten a few times. Look at year one personnel expenses. $125,000. Does this require inquiry? Absolutely it does. If you think back to the first year being 5 in attendance and then you see $125,000 a year here, this is important. You need to flesh this out. We recently had a case in West Region where a planter left the field after 18 months, frustrated and claiming he had run out of money and he had multiple partners and all of that, and he just left. We went back and looked at the projection, and everybody thought he had, I think, $137,000 or $138,000 in the personnel expense year one, and everybody involved, as we debriefed that situation, everybody involved, the Sin City Missionary, the CPC, the State Convention, and the Regional Mobilizer made an assumption that that was 2 staff members, and all the while it was 1 staff member. That 1 staff member, the church planner himself, for 18 months had taken 100% of the partnership dollars for his salary and had nothing left to give to the church plant. Now, had the CPC been in high relationship with the church planner, he may have known that. That's one of the reasons why we need you guys to be close to your church planters and intimate in this, to ask these questions. There was no way to know that other than retrospectively, and that was unfortunate. So this $125,000 is completely out of step with the overall projection, especially given the numbers from the very first screens. Perhaps there needs to be a recommendation. You as a CPC would recommend bivocational or co-vocational. If this is the salary that is required, then there is no way a church plant based on this projection would ever be able to sustain that salary level. So now bivocational or co-vocational becomes an important conversation for you to have. The next screen is the anticipated expenses. This is non-negotiable. They can go higher on their cooperative giving, 6 and 4, but they can't go lower. So this screen only has a minute because we doubt we'll get very many comments there. But if somebody asks about over and under, you can address it and say they can't give under 6 and 4, but they can definitely give over. I'm surprised that several of our projections do have higher rates of Great Commission giving. The next screen is Budget Builder anticipated expenses. So you've got some figures there under other missions. That's great. We love to see church planters giving to other missions. But in this case, because of the specificity of these numbers, the CPC may want to ask some questions about this. $9,328 in the first year. That is so specific. What is it that you are giving to here in other missions? And you can unpack that or advise or have conversations based on the specificity of that number and encourage them in what they're providing financial assistance for, or have a conversation about the necessity or the wisdom providing for that mission while they're trying to all the while build their own church. In the past, this has revealed some really discussion-worthy topics right here. Allocated associational giving outside the 4%. We've found that certain associations had required giving to the association, and we can't, as NAM, we can't require that. Our cooperative agreements are with our states, CP through the state at 6%, and other Great Commission giving at 4%. Now, part of that obviously can be the association, but we just can't mandate that. Other church planning network dues, some church planners will put that in here. So we want to have that discussion based on 1 sticker, 2 sticker, 3 sticker kind of philosophy. We need to make sure that we are the main sticker. We don't mind a second sticker, but there's some financial guidelines that you can ask about there in terms of how much they can give to the secondary network. And then, do they have an outside missionary? This is always an opportunity to talk about Annie Armstrong and how we as Southern Baptists operate in missions giving. We would not require them to remove their giving to an outside missionary, but maybe over time transition that into an Annie Armstrong situation. So all worthy discussion points based on the specificity of the numbers in other missions. And then you might ask them for other thoughts. And then finally, you have the financial synopsis screen. Basically, all we want you to do here is convey to your audience of CPCs that if you see a projection, we want to encourage your audience of CPCs to look back through in their mind through this projection as a whole. Remember, we started with 5 people, ending with 18 in the first year, and we're allocating almost a $1.5 million budget for a church that's a year old with 18 people. Serious concerns in this projection. This projection should never have gone through to the regional mobilizer. At this point, you'll want to move into a debrief and Q&A. So there will be definitely things that people see in the projection or have questions about the projection that you just led them through, and those are discussion-worthy topics. Feel free to work through those, think through those. Remember the key emphasis points. Number 1, it's a tool, not a hoop. Number 2, we want it to build relationship and coach mentor / moments as they work in person through the PlantPro with each and every one of their church planters.